Hello, Patterson Pope, and welcome to the first training session for SteelBrick, our new quoting module for Salesforce. This training is intended and directed toward the project planning department. However, anybody who uses the bill of material area, printing quotes, setting margins, things like that, should find this information useful. I'm going to try to keep this really brief. This is meant to be a basic overview. I'm sure we'll follow up with additional training sessions in the future. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you notice is on the opportunity, we now have this red shopping cart quote area. This is the SteelBrick area. This is where we start SteelBrick quotes. So when you're ready to start a new quote under your opportunity, you will go to the red shopping cart quotes area and press new quote. This is just some pretty basic quote information. For the planners, we'll fill in a little bit of it. The rest of it will be stuff that the sales rep would like to add to their quote. But to get started, it brings over the opportunity that it's tied to. We can choose here whether it's primary or not. We may know that up front. If we're only doing the one option, we can go ahead and mark this primary. If we have a bunch of options, probably let the sales rep handle which quote is going to be primary. The type is always going to be quote. The payment terms will default to net 30. This start date and price book area, we don't need to worry about that. The first thing we want to look at is the drawing and quote version. If you have that information right in front of you, you can certainly put it in here. For example, I'm working on quote project number 304955, and the drawing revision is A2. Since I know that, I could put it in here, and that would transfer over to the quote. But I'm going to leave it blank to show you what happens. And what's going to happen is it will automatically bring over the project number, and we can just add the drawing revision to it later. For the planners, the status of this will always be in draft, since we're not actually setting the selling price on the quote. It's still a draft. We got a 90-day default expired term. We can enter in the sales rep's name for them here. Standard Salesforce lookup field. And primary contact and anything else there that the sales rep would like to add, they can add when they get the quote back. This next area is how the quote will lay out. We're going to do group line items, so it looks more like an eManage quote used to look. I've got a warning here that says unchecking group line items will permanently remove grouping. We'll get into a little bit more what that means, but basically, once we make groups on a quote, this box is going to check automatically. It's going to check by itself. If this print line items box is checked, that means every single line item we put into the quote, including admin fee and local delivery, they will also show up underneath the group on the quote, and we don't want that to happen. So we want to uncheck this. Easier to do it now while it's right in front of you. Also, probably avoid a call from the sales rep in the future about why those line items are showing up on the quote. But if you forget, it's no big deal. They would print a quote and see that it had those line items on it and come back to this screen and uncheck the box. But this is the way we want it to look when they're getting ready to print the quote. You'll see that when we come back off the bill of materials screen later on. The address information should all auto-populate. After we save it, it gets that information from the account and the opportunity. And then these additional text fields are just extra areas on the quote for an introduction to the quote and some notes. I don't see the planners really using this field unless for some reason you wanted to put something in here that would show up on the quote just as sort of a reminder, maybe something like floor covering not included. So that the customer, that would be on the quote when the customer gets the quote, they know not to expect floor covering. I can think of a number of examples where you would use that. Once this is complete and set up, we will go ahead and hit save. And that's where we enter the SteelBrick fields or the SteelBrick area that looks a lot different than what we're used to seeing in Salesforce. I'll go over what these buttons at the top mean first. Save will save your work and then drop you back out into that quote screen we just came from. It also, if you've made some changes, it will run a calculation. It'll calculate out your changes before it saves. The quick save button does the same thing as save, except for it doesn't kick you back to that last screen. The quick save will run any calculations you have and leave you here so you can continue to work. Cancel is just the way it'll discard any changes you've made since your last save and kick you back to the previous screen. Okay, calculate is just sort of quick save, but without the save. So when you hit calculate, it'll run any calculations for changes that you've made, but it won't save anything. So it's a good way to maybe play with some numbers, make a change, hit calculate, see what the effect is. If you don't like it and just want to not do it anymore, you can just go to cancel or just back out, but it doesn't save anything. It just runs the calculation for you. Delete lines is a multiple line deleting tool. So if you want to delete 5 lines at one time, you'd select those lines and then hit delete lines. That'll get rid of them. And then add group and ungroup is what we're going to start with here. The groups are akin to the eManage phases. So every group will show up on the quote as, material, installation, freight and handling, that kind of thing. And then once you have a bunch of groups in there, if you decide you want to go a different direction, you click ungroup and that gets rid of all your groups. So it says right down here, the first thing it says is this quote has no line items. Click on add group button to create a new group. So let's get started. So the first thing we do is add a group, and that kind of starts the hierarchy structure of how SteelBrick is going to work. So this blue area that says group 1, this is what's called the group, and it's most like the phase level of the old eManage quote. So this is the line item that actually appears on the quote. All the parts products that we're going to add to this will all roll up a sum total, and that will be the sum total of the group that shows on the quote. So the 3 lines are the line item, which is the individual line item, and then the group, which is the grouping of those individual line items that go into the group. And then up here, this quote information level sort of controls the whole group, or the whole quote at the same time. And when we get some parts in here, I'll show you how that structure interacts. But let's go ahead and get started. So you can make a determination at this point how you want to set this up. There's a number of different ways to do it. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. What I've been doing is creating all my groups up front and then populating them after. Perfectly acceptable to add in all your products first and then create the groups and distribute your parts to the proper groups. But I'll kind of show you both of those as we walk through. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 2 more groups here. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to name these really short and simple. We'll call them material, freight, and installation. And you can add descriptions here. Depends on the rep, I guess. Some like to do this themselves. You can see it's got a full text field where you can do bold and quotes and paragraphs in different sizes. This can be as long and short as you want, but these do show on the quote. Just like the phase descriptions used to in eManage. Because I can't stand that. Okay, now we've got our group structure set up, so now we can add parts. As I said before, you can do this any way you want. You can go into each group and add just the products that belong to that group. You can add all the products for your whole job into one group and then drag and drop them into the group they belong in. or some sort of hybrid of that. And I'll just do that now so that I can show you both ways. The sample I'm going to show you here will have Space Saver and some Rousseau. So let's just start with that. As you know, as you've heard, I'm sure, we're not going to be importing anything. We're going to be pulling in a single part number that represents the entire product line for your order, for your project. So I've gone ahead and I've done a sample project, and I've got some documents here to work from. But just to start off with, we know we're going to need, we'll just work in material. We know we're going to need some Space Saver and Rousseau material. So I'll click here on Add Products. This is going to take us to the search screen. And as of right now, all these parts are set up the same way they have been as we've been working in Salesforce already. So we can search for the name of the familiar P2PP. And I will go ahead and I'll pick my Space Saver mobile part. And the first big benefit that you'll see from this is the adding parts and searching feature. So we know in the old version now I would have to add that and then go back and search and find something else. But you see this button right here, the Select and Add More. What that does for me is I've selected my Space Saver mobile part. I'm going to hit Select and Add More. That's going to add that part to my bill of material and then leave me right here on this screen so that I can get more stuff. So now I can search for my Rousseau part. Oh, search. And there's my Rousseau material right there. Since I'm here, I also already know I'm going to need freight eventually for the Rousseau, so I might as well grab that too. Even though I'm adding it to the wrong group, you'll see how that works. So when I've selected everything, I'm going to select on this round of searching. We'll hit Select. And now that brings my parts into the bill of material under the material phase. And of course, we have Rousseau freight here, which doesn't belong in this phase. It belongs in the freight phase. And I'm calling them phases out of habit. We'll get to calling them groups. So I'm going to just, all I do is click on this Rousseau freight and drag it down here to freight and drop it. So now that moves that freight into my Rousseau freight into my freight group where I want it. So let's go add some more products, and I'll show you a little bit more of that. So I'll go down here to the installation group and add products, and it takes me back to the search screen. And now I can go back to P2PP, and I can grab everything I need for an install for this project. So just going down the list here, I will need, so I'm going to need a receipt and handling. I'll need a W&A freight quote. I will need an admin fee, of course, and some labor and local delivery. Also rubber mats here. This is all the stuff that was on P2PP before. So now I can just, I don't need anything else for this job, so I'll just hit Select. And now, because I started this in Add Products, kind of the reverse. Now I've got everything that I just brought in is in this installation field. I know the only things that really belong in here are the admin fee and the labor. So everything else, I can just grab them and drop them. Grab it up there, and drop it. Grab it up there, and drop it. So that's simple, that quick. I've got a fully formed bill of material here. All I got to do is tell the software how much the stuff costs. So, as I said before, we're not importing. So we're using Configura. We're using the bill of material screen. For contracts, we'll use the end user quote. And we'll just populate that information here. For this one, I would have a Rousseau quote that I'd be getting my information from. And all these project associated costs would come from, of course, the spreadsheet that we export from Configura. So I'm sure everyone's seen this, but just in case you don't know, on the print screen, under list, I've got the Space Saver bill of material, which gives me the list price and P2's cost. And then I've got the end user quote, which for most contracts There's a couple of exceptions, and we'll talk about those types of exceptions during the meetings and stuff like that. But for most contracts, this will give us what the customer is going to pay for the material. I've already printed those out in advance, so I don't need to do that now. So let's say I've got my Rousseau quote, and all my material for Rousseau is a cost of $3,000 and a list of $7,000. And another note here, yes, we're going back to using list prices. If you get a quote from a vendor for material or labor or anything and they've given you cost, we'll just double that and give ourselves a 50% discount from list. Just like the good old days, I always like working with a list price better. It allows the salespeople to show list on the quote and give a discount from list. And, it's just a cleaner, makes more sense. We don't have a bunch of empty fields. And so we're going to go back to making sure we have a list price for most things. There may be some exceptions to that. Getting a price to zero, for example, for contract freight, we may have to show a list of zero. But again, that's another one of those things let me get back to you on. So I've got my Space Saver bill of material here. And on the last page, I've got a grand total list and a grand total cost. This is the P2. This is the bill of material, not the end user quote. So I'm looking for this information here. The one thing I'll caution you about is if you have a file that has existing parts on it, be careful that you're on the last page that says SSC BOM. If we have existing parts, there would be additional pages here, and they also total those additional existing things. We want to be really careful that we're just looking at the new material. So all I need to do is, see, I've got here my my list price here of $33,246.70 and my Patterson Pope cost of $13,298.68. All I need to do is transfer that information right into SteelBrick. Let's see, the cost is $13,298.68. Try that again. $13,298.68 with a list of $33,246.70. Okay. Now you can see all it's done there is taken those numbers from me. You see the quantity field over here, but it hasn't done any calculation for me yet. It's just taken the numbers I typed in, hasn't done anything. So at this point, I want to hit calculate. Now normally I'm probably going to change this pricing method before I hit calculate because it just saves me a step, but I just want to show you about pricing methods. So I'm going to hit calculate. Okay, so that starts doing the math for me. That's multiplying out my quantity times my unit cost and my unit list to give me an AC total cost and a total list. It's also showing me the manufacturer discount. So this is a great example. So I can see here that this is showing me a 60 manufacturer discount from Space Saver, which I know from looking at my bill of material that that's exactly where I want it to be. However, in this example, I see that my Rousseau only has a discount of 57.143. So something's wrong there because I know we get a 70% discount from Rousseau. So that would make me go back to my Rousseau quote and look and realize that this number should be 10,000. And then I'll hit calculate again. There we go. So now this looks right up to this point. My pricing method is set to list right now. I'm going to save it just with a quick save so we stay on this screen. And you'll see here that this net total, this is the customer total. So this is what the customer is currently, with what we have set up, this is what they're paying. It's list price because our pricing method is set to list. As you know, that's very rarely the case that we sell anything at list, and our salespeople will mark up from cost up. So at this point, we want to change our pricing method to cost. Okay, and when I hit calculate now, the only change that's going to make is it's going to change the selling price from the list to the cost. So now the selling price over here is the cost. So now it's in a state where it's waiting, it's expecting now. You've told SteelBrick, all right, I've given you the list prices, but I don't want to work in list now. I want to mark up from cost. So now SteelBrick has opened up this markup field for us so that we could mark things up. And it's set our current selling price to cost. So we can start marking up from there. I'll finish up the bill of material before we go through what we're going to do going forward. But those are the steps to get the price in there, the list, the cost, and then set your pricing method over to get it ready to be marked up. So the rest of this stuff just comes from our spreadsheet. We've already got a cost and a list for all these project associated costs on our spreadsheet. So I'm just going to copy those numbers directly in. Talk amongst yourselves while I do that. So I'm going to just make these nice round numbers for simplicity. Again, if you only have a cost on something, we're going to go ahead and double it for list. The spreadsheet does that for us. You'll have to do it with a calculator for other quotes that we get. And again, since we're going to be marking this up and not working down from list, we're going to set these all to cost. Now, the time we do work down from list, of course, is when we're working with a contract, GSA, NJPA, any of the state contracts. So in that case, we leave the pricing method at list, but I'll go through how to work through a contract one after I finish this sample. Okay. So you'll also notice when I hit this drop down that I have more choices here than cost or list. These are things in the future we may use, particularly this profit margin percent. But right now we're just sort of in the middle of developing that. So right now only cost and list are our only two actual choices. So I'm going to go ahead and quick save this again, which should run a calculation for me on the numbers I just put in there. Okay, and while we're at this point, I'll also mention one other quick thing is we have gained back sort of this ability that we used to have in eManage to set prices by quantity. In other words, so if we know our labor rate is $69 an hour, we could put the cost of our labor at $69 an hour. And of course, you'd want to go back to list here. Hang on, bear with me. You do this all before you would have saved it. So we'd want to go back to list and we'd put our cost and list at 69, and then the labor would be done by the number of man hours. I'm sure you all remember how we used to do that in eManage. Same type of thing with admin fee. We could put the cost to 3 cents and the list at 6 cents. And then the quantity would be the cost of everything else. And we may go to that because like eManage, if you remember auto parts, SteelBrick does have the ability to recognize that when we put material into a bill of material, that it needs an admin fee and that the admin fee should be equal in quantity to the cost of the material. We haven't got that set up to this point, but you can do it manually this way, just the same way we used to. So those are just some things I wanted to point out, but we'll go back here and set these back to what I had them at before. Put it back to cost. So the pricing method, the thing to remember is that if you're working from list, So there's two times we're working from list. When we're first entering the part in, we need to enter a list price. So that's why the parts come in as list. Then we set the list price and the unit cost. And then if it's going to be a contract job where we work from list down, we'll leave the pricing method in list. If it's a normal commercial sale, we want to move the pricing method over to cost before we save it. So once you've got everything back here set up, all the pricing methods are set to cost. This is ready to be marked up. What we want to do is we're going to have a standard markup of 65%. This is just so that when the number gets to the salesperson, it's already marked up. Just in case the quote gets out the door, they forget to change something, we're covered and we're not sending things out at cost. You'll see when I hit the calculate here what the 65% markup relates to in profit margin, and it's healthy. So that will help us along. Before I do that, I want to talk about the hierarchy of the bill of material. So these are the line items. As I mentioned before, this is the group, and this is the global or quote. And they relate one-to-one to what we used to do in eManage with the bill of material line items, the phases, and the quote. Same type of idea. So I can change the markup. Let me do this. I can change the markup on this line item to 65%. And then I hit calculate. So it gives me a selling price on this line item of $21,942.82 with a 65% markup. So that's at the line item level that I just set that markup. So now if I come to the group level and say, okay, for the group, I want a 75% markup. And I hit calculate. Now what that did was that applied the 75% markup to this line item that didn't have a markup already. But since this already had 65 in there, it ignored that. So it works from line item up. So I'll show you one more example of that. So if I go up to the global level and then put the markup at 45 and run a calculate. So now, if you look at this line item, it stayed 65 because it got it from the line item markup. This line item stayed 75 because it got it from its group markup. But everything else on the job went to the global markup of 45 because it didn't have a line item or a group markup. Clear as mud, right? I think you'll understand what I mean when we run it through a couple times. But there's a hierarchy there where it looks at the line item first, the group second, and the global third. Same thing applies to this target customer amount. There is no target customer amount on the line item, but it will look at the group first and then the global. Okay? So, as I said before, we are going to standardize the markup when we give it to the salespeople at 65. And I will show you what the effect of that is. See, I deleted the markup from the line item. I deleted it from the group. I just put it up here at global. So it applied a 65% markup on everything in this quote. Okay? Which gives us just under a 40% profit margin on the job. And you can see up here we've got the list amount, our cost, the net amount, and that tells us what our overall profit margin is. So this is, now I would save this and go ahead and attach my drawings, but this is the state we'll give it back to the sales reps in when we turn it around to them. Just to show you an example of how they might use it. So if they get it back in this state, they may decide, that's a little too much. I don't mind that 39% margin on material, but that's a little bit high of a margin for me on the freight and on the installation here at the bottom. So I'm going to take this 65 and I'm going to apply it just to the material. But I'm going to go 45 markup on the freight, and I'm going to go 50 on installation. And then they calculate. So now we've got a 65% markup, 39% margin on material, 45 to 31 on freight, and 50 and 33.3 on installation. That's how I envision them kind of using this. And then, I know a lot of them like nice round numbers. So, they may see that this is 3625 at a 45% markup. You might as well go ahead and just make that 3600. So then they would just come here to target customer amount for that group and say, okay, I want that group to be 3600. And then calculate. So it's at 36, and then it reads back to them that that's a 44% markup. Same here with material. They, let's just call that 27,000. Close enough. So they might change that to 27,000. So that's sort of how I envision that working from the sales reps. But again, they're going to get it from us with around a 39% margin across the board. So if I want to put it back into that state, I can delete all these other markups and customer amounts that I put in there and set this markup back to 65. Okay, good. So you can see here, I've been making a lot of changes to this. I've been messing around. I've been changing markups. There are many, many, many fields in SteelBrick. We're only seeing this many, but there are as many, if not more, than eManage. So what happens when I'm making all these changes and calculating and recalculating is that from time to time, fields get stepped on, they get crisscrossed, numbers linger. And this is why these fields are here, so that we can check and make sure if this markup up here says 65, we expect the applied markup on these to be 65. So this little button right here is reset discounts. And what this will do is this will go through all those hidden fields and kind of wash it out for us. So I'm just going to click that and then hit calculate again. And you can see that now everything's kind of fixed itself up. So we're at this point. We got a 65% markup on everything. All our costs are right. We're good. We're happy. So now we can hit save. And this is going to take us back out to the main quote screen. So if you remember when we were setting up this quote, this drawing quote version number I told you about, where we could put in the project number and the drawing revision number into that field. If we had done that, this would be complete right now. But since we didn't have that information right in front of us, if you remember, I left it blank. So what it returned was just the internal job number for us. So at this point, all we would need to do is click into that field and add our revision number to it. Either way works. This is also the place where if we've determined as we worked on it that even though we didn't set it up originally as primary, I'm going to want this to be the primary one. We can go ahead and check that, or again, leave that up to the rep. I'm going to take that off of primary for now. This is what we talked about earlier with group line items and print line items. This is exactly the state we wanted in when we hand it over to the reps. Again, nothing bad will happen as long as we don't uncheck this box and hit save. And the worst that'll happen if you do that is you have to recreate your groups. You're not going to lose any of the parts. Parts will all remain. The costs will all remain. But you just need to go in there and recreate the groups if that happens. Here's that note we had earlier. And this is where the salesperson could add an introduction to the quote. You notice here open activities in a new task field. I don't know if they'll want to use this or not. I'm going to show it to them, so we'll see how it goes. But this would be a way for them to send send a task to us directly from the quote. So if they had quote version A2 and they wanted a change to A2, they could open up this quote and send you a task from A2 and just say, hey, I don't, I like A2, I like the way it is, but there's this mistake, or can we just add this, or can you modify, can you move admin up into the material, something like that. This is the group of all of our lines, and this shows us our groups and whether or not we have them marked as optional. I didn't show you that on the other screen, but there's a checkbox for optional, and all that does is optional kind of pulls it out of the main quote. So when they print their quote, they would have a main quote with a total, and then they would have an optional items page that had other items. So you can see many, many uses for that. And then the good thing about that is when the order is placed, if they say, yes, they want this and they want the optional face panels, then you just uncheck optional from the face panels and it adds it to the quote. So that should save us a lot of time there. So here is notes and attachments. This is where we want to add those things like the bill of materials, maybe some quotes, vendor quotes, maybe even the drawing, although sit tight on the drawing. I'll show you something else. But this is this is all very familiar steel brick stuff. If I want to put the BOM here and, just the same way we do it before, maybe this is a contract one, so we want to give them the end user quote as well. That's it. And then those things show up there in the notes and attachments. You could put the drawing there too. I'll show you something else for the drawing. Include document. So what this will do is this adds it to the quote, and it adds it in two places. It's going to add it down here to additional documents. It's also going to put it in here in notes and attachments, just as if you'd attached it there. The difference with this is that this will also give the salesperson, when they're creating their quote, the opportunity to directly attach the drawing or anything else that you add using this button directly to the quote. So I will go through and show you what that looks like. This display order field, if you were adding many documents, the quote's always going to be first. The terms and conditions will always be second. If you're adding 6 or 7 documents, you can show what order you wanted them to appear on the list. I'll show you the list. It doesn't really matter if you put anything in there or not. So now I will save that. And then I'm going to preview my document. Again, now we're into the salesperson realm a little bit here, but I'll show you just the result of what we just did. So automatically included are the quote document itself and this Patterson-Pope terms and conditions for steel orders. That's already there, so that's going to be on the quote. Anything else, anything in that additional documents field will populate over here so that they can add it to the quote if they'd like. And there's even some default ones we can have, like Carlos has put in here, the mechanical assist brochure and the Eclipse brochure. I'm not going to add those now because sometimes they take a minute to load. But the salesperson could come in and just add those things to their quote right from here. And I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so the first page here is the quote. You can see the names of the groups and the description that I gave everything, along with their net total as we have it set up with the 65% markup. Here's my note, the floor covering not included note. The second page is the standard steel product terms and conditions. And then because we added it there at the end, there's our drawing. Every page has a sign-off on it. Notice the sign-offs. So that's the walkthrough of that. So that's your basic run-of-the-mill commercial quote. One other thing I'll mention is you don't want to edit any of the groups or add groups from this page. You always want to do that from the edit lines page. The only thing you want to do from this page is reorder the groups. So if for some reason I wanted installation to be ahead of freight, as it showed on the quote. Or if I had multiple rooms and the way that I put them in my bill of materials, they were out of order for some reason. I could just come in here to, let's go to freight. Say I want freight to be last. So I'll go to freight and I'll just change this number to 5. Don't change anything else. And then I'm going to save that. And when I go to my group list now, freight is under installation because of the order number. And that's the way it would display on the quote. If you have something marked optional, again, it would show up in here as that. Okay, that's the basics of it. You can stop here if you just want to go ahead and mess around a little bit. I'm going to continue for maybe another 10 minutes. I want to show 2 things, and that's how we're going to deal with contracts, and then a shortcut at the end that you might want to stick around for. So, all right, so let's say I'm going to go in now and I'm going to turn this into a contract job. So our Space Saver would be on contract, our Rousseau would be off contract. So what would you do? You'd make another group called off contract material, and you drag Rousseau into that group, right? So the only thing left in the contract material group is going to be your Space Saver stuff. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to pretend we did that, but I'm just going to delete the Rousseau. And then I'm going to put this back into a state as if we just brought it in. So it would have 0 cost, it would be set to list, and it would have a 0 list price. And then we'll run the calculate again. Okay, here we go. So this is what it would look like when we first brought it in, and now this time we're doing it as a contract job. So this is where the end user quote from Space Saver comes into play, from Configura. So in this case, I'm going to do the same thing to get my cost and list, right? So I've got my Space Saver bill of material, and I go to that last page. And here's my information that I need for the quote. So all I'm going to do, same thing as before. I'm going to copy that in there of 14,264.51. And I'm going to set my list price at 36,157. Okay. Because this is a contract, I'm going to leave the pricing method as list. And there's 2 reasons for that, and I'll show you those. So I've got those in there. I've got my pricing method set to list. I'm going to go ahead and hit calculate so that it runs through my numbers for me. Okay. So this shows me that my manufacturer discount with this list and this cost is 60.548. In Configura, which only goes to 1 decimal place on the quote, shows me 60.5. So everything looks good there. Now I want to look at my end user quote to see what the customer is going to pay. So this is GSA, so the end user quote works fine. The end user quote works fine for everything but South Carolina contract. We have our meeting, and some of you guys who work specifically with South Carolina, we'll talk about how to do that. It's just as easy. So the information we're getting from this is what the customer is going to pay. $18,526.39. So how am I going to get that? Target customer amount. So I want $18,526.39 to be in my target customer amount. I actually just cut and pasted that from the PDF, which is the first time I've done that, so pretty exciting. So now I'll hit calculate, and boom, there's my sale price, $18,526.39. It shows me a discount of from list of $48,761. My discount from list on my end user quote is 48.8. Again, that's rounding up to 1 decimal place, so we are good to go. So by staying in list, what we've done here is we have disabled this markup field, so it's unable to be marked up, and even if they try to mark it up from here, it's going to ignore me because I'm in the pricing method of list. When you're in a pricing method of list, It doesn't even acknowledge that a markup is possible. So you can see nothing changed here when I put in that markup. So that's our first line of defense against getting off of contract pricing. The other thing we're going to do is we are going to lock this and quick save it. All right. Well, that didn't work exactly as I'd hoped, but because it's telling me it's locked and can't be changed, so I should have quick saved it before. So let's do that. Okay. So now I've got my sale price at $18,526. I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to lock it and save it. And if it gives me that error again, I know why. Okay, good. So now it's been locked and saved with this selling price of $18,526.39. So if I'm a salesperson now and I kind of forget that this is a GSA job, and I say, man, that's a bad margin, 23. I want to at least sell this for 20,000. So I'm going to hit 20,000 and I'm going to calculate, and it is going to change that number to 20,000. And I'm going to say, okay, cool, that's great. I'm happy now with everything. Let's go ahead and save it. Now I'm going to get that error message that you saw that it can't be changed because it's locked. Just sort of a second line of defense. So now we've got two reminders that you shouldn't be changing that price. So that's about all we can do to stop that from happening. Hopefully, one of the things we'll have in the future is once that locked box is checked and we hit calculate, that whole group grays out. That's one of the requests we have in there, is to just shut that group down when it's locked. But I think everyone's smart enough to handle, the two reminders that you're not supposed to change it. So I'm just going to put this back the way it was. Turned off lock. Do my calculate. And do my save. So that's the basics of contracts. You can tell how it would work, I think, with freight. Same thing. We'll have a freight group, a contract freight group, where we set the selling price to 0. There may be some challenges with that initially. There's workarounds for it. Selling price of 0. Steelbrick doesn't like that right now, but we can work around it. So that's the contract basics. So there's one more thing that I want to show you, two more things. I didn't mention this description field. Right now, most parts that come in won't have a description, and that's probably okay because we're doing our quotes by group. So the description is coming from here. If there ever came a case where we wanted to do a line item quote for whatever reason, it would get the description from here. And you can see this admin fee, this has a description in it. That comes from the part. So if the part has it stored in the system, has a description, it'll bring it in, just like it did with admin fee here. If it doesn't, it just brings in a text field where I can add a description. That's just FYI. There's really, I can't think of many uses for that immediately, but we are making some changes to the parts. That's one of the first things on our agenda, and we're going to try to get descriptions on most of the parts. Okay, so we covered commercial pricing. We covered contract pricing. We covered quote documents, how and where to attach things. So the last thing I'll show you is I kind of showed you when I brought the parts in the long way to do it. There's a better way, and there's even a better way than the better way that will be coming eventually. But I wanted to show you this right up front. First, I'll show you how it works, and then I'll show you how to start setting it up for yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of everything we have in here. So that was, I hit ungroup, And now I'm going to check everything. And I'm going to hit delete lines. And then I'm going to wipe out this margin. Okay, so now we're back to the beginning as if we're just starting a brand new quote. So the first step is still the same. You have to add a group. So we'll add a group. Now, from here, we can do something called add favorites. And what add favorites will do for you is, and I've created a couple here as samples. Actually, let me get rid of this one because I'll recreate it now. Well, I'll just show you. So if I pick the standard SpaceSaver project kit that I created, and I hit select, and there's select and add more, same as you get in regular parts. So you can add multiple favorites to one bill of material. But for right now, I'm going to hit the standard SpaceSaver project kit. And I'm going to hit select. And what that's going to bring in for me is everything I typically need to price out a SpaceSaver job. The only thing I need to do is add a few more groups. And again, shorthand, this would be the freight group. This will be the install group. And this will be the material group. Got a tab out of these to get them. There you go. And then I can just drag these things to the group they belong in. I want admin fee down here in installation. I want labor down here in installation. I want local delivery and freight. WNA and freight, receipt handling and freight. And I don't want rubber mat on this quote, we'll say, so you can just delete it. And same thing, if this were going for a direct ship job, you didn't need local delivery on this one. It's okay that it's in your favorites because you could just delete it out of this particular line item. And then you just go through the process again here. You just set up your pricing and do that. So now I'll show you how to set that up. Let's say let's do a new group. And this group's got some Rousseau in it. So this is going to be our Rousseau group. And I'll get my products the normal way, the old-fashioned way already. And I know for when I'm doing a Rousseau job, I know I'll need Rousseau freight, I'll need Rousseau material. Always going to need an admin for Rousseau, so I'll go ahead and grab an admin part. Oops. I know, you can all see it. There it is. And then I'm done, so I'll bring that in. So now I've got this group that I created. It's got Rousseau freight, Rousseau material, and it's got an admin fee. So now I can just hit that little add to favorite star, give it a name. I'll call this my Rousseau kit, and save it. And from now on, whenever I have to add Rousseau to a bill of material, I can go to add favorites and just select my Rousseau kit. When that comes in, it will have all the parts that I just added to that other group. I added my Rousseau parts there. Some other things on this menu are clone group. So the use of clone group would be, say you have 3 rooms that have the SpaceSaver shelving, static shelving in them, and the salesperson wants each of those rooms on their own group on the quote. So you could set up one room 155. Set it up, put your SpaceSaver shelving in there, anything else you need in there. Maybe they're doing them inclusive, so you've got the admin fee, everything in there. So you do room 155, boom. Then you hit clone group, and it gives you an exact copy at the bottom of that same group you just cloned. So now all I'm doing is changing the prices, and it's done. And then, of course, when you clone group, it always puts it at the bottom. So this is where you would go and out to the next page. So let's save this. This is where you could change this group number change the numbers of these groups to get them in the order that you'd want them in. All right, I think that should give everyone everything you need to kind of get going. Let me show you one more thing on the way out the door. I don't know if this will come into play or not, but say I'm talking to one of the other planners, and where do I want to go? Okay, say I'm talking to one of the other planners, and they already have a complex group set up that I don't want to necessarily recreate, or I have one that they need. I can share a group. Oops, I gotta pick one. I can pick this group and share it. Caroline. Hit share. And now automatically that group is on her favorites list. She doesn't have to create it. It's the same parts, same group. So that's all I got. Looking forward to our meeting and some one-on-one training with you guys with this. I'm thrilled. It came out really well. It's working really well. We're slated to go live January 3rd, 2017. Couple of tweaks we need before then, but we could start using it today if we had to. Thanks again, everybody, and I look forward to talking to you soon.